If you're stuck in your design process and you're looking for new ideas, then today you're at the right place because I will be sharing a trick that will hopefully get you inspired. Hi, my name is Alex, I'm an architect in UK, and today I'll be sharing this approach that I've developed during my last year in architecture. So this process is very simple. It involves applying a set of rules to a simple geometric shape, in this case a cube, and then replicating this process several times to create multiple versions of the same object. So for instance, if you take a cube and then you start applying a set of rules, which in this case will be extrusion of every plane of the cube outwards, so then what you'll get is this funny looking object that looks like a cube with extruded sides. It's not any other object, it's a shape that has a certain set of rules applied to it, which means the same shape can be replicated several times with slight adjustment of these rules. So here's the version of this drawing that I've created a while ago, which basically takes this approach to its kind of natural conclusion. So I started with a simple shape like this, and then I started to create variations on a theme. So here's another example as well, which takes a cube and then uses a slice method with different thicknesses to achieve different variations on a theme. And so for example, you can even take it a bit more literally in your project. These are different shapes that actually look like columns. If you have a column in a project that you'd like to embellish and make it special rather than a standard, a square or a circular column, you can play with the edges of these shapes to basically create a different edge condition for the columns. For example, we have these convex, concave, extruded. Now you might be thinking, well, this is quite a rigid approach, it doesn't seem to be very creative. But I think the point of creativity is actually to be able to work with constraints that we have. And so this is a great example of this sort of technique because the rules are very simple and they're bound by a single shape. And so all you have to do is really to come up with as many ideas as you can. And by doing that, I think you're going to be building a creative muscle, but also you're going to start to come up with the geometrical ideas for your project that you can apply in your project. So the interesting thing about this approach, it kind of flips the design process on its head, because usually we start with a concept and then we develop our design proposal, whereas in this case you kind of work backwards. You start with a shape and then you try to apply it in your design process. And the reason we usually follow this process, that we have a design concept and then a solution, is because in the university we're taught that idea follows the concept, follows design proposal. In general, this is it's a true statement. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, you start with the idea in your head, you move it over to the concept stage, and finally you have design resolution. And this is quite neat because when you present your project, you do want to have some kind of justification for why it's existing, because otherwise you might as well be studying some kind of abstract art that doesn't have any relation to the real world. So this linear kind of thinking, I have a narrative, a concept, which leads to a design. It's quite nice. However, the way we arrive to this is not linear process. It looks more like this. So we might wander in all sorts of directions before we actually make any progress. And so that's basically how design is developed. It's never a linear process. So I think the beauty of this method is that it kind of flips the design process on its head. So rather than starting from a narrative, we actually start with the 3D shapes. And because 3D shapes are part of our vocabulary, our architectural vocabulary, it's important to invest time into learning them and trying to be familiar with them so that it kind of becomes intuitive, as opposed to trying to come up with a verbal concept or a building and then trying to match the geometric shape. We actually start with geometric shape and then we derive the verbal concept from it. So I think this approach is not always perfect and it might not apply to every single situation, but if you're trying to make something that's visually or experientially interesting, i.e. it has an interesting geometry, then I think this concept is very much valid, and I think you can get that intellectual next level sort of thing by working simultaneously with the verbal kind of concept and the three-dimensional concept at the same time for the maximum effectiveness, because they will, in this non-linear design process, they will inspire one another to create a nicer and more meaningful project. I'd like to thank you if you watched this video till the end. Leave a comment if you did, subscribe for more upcoming videos, and I will see you in the next one.